Welcome into Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. On today's show, we've got a little head coach GM presser reaction as Liam Coen and James Gladstone spoke to Jaguars media members ahead of the 2026 NFL Draft. So we'll be breaking down just some of the kind of major points and major takeaways that I had from the presser. And then ESPN dropped draft intel for all 32 NFL teams, including your Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll be breaking down what Jordan Reid had to say and just kind of some overall, maybe some draft targets that the Jaguars could be interested in on day two. This is Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Cullen Brown. Without any further ado, let's get into the presser reaction, starting with Travis Hunter. We had an update from James Gladstone on the former first round pick, number 2 overall, Heisman Trophy winner. You already know who he is if you're a Jaguars fan. And James Gladstone kind of gave a timetable in terms of what Travis Hunter could potentially return to Jaguars, kind of activities in terms of a full-time capacity. He had this to say. For all intents and purposes, he'll be a limited participant through the offseason program with eyes on returning to play at full tick in training camp. And I think that is the correct approach. Obviously, Travis Hunter's going through a little bit of a change that we'll talk about here in a second, moving from a full-time or kind of really a mixed match of cornerback and wide receiver duo last year in his 2024 campaign to now really focusing in on the cornerback situation and more of a part-time receiver. But we'll talk about that in a second. He's recovering from an torn LCL injury that he suffered last season, and I think this is the correct approach, right? You obviously gave up a lot of draft capital to go trade up for Travis Hunter, and he is somebody that you were looking at as a pillar of your franchise moving forward. And I kind of always was of the opinion, even going into the last draft, that Travis Hunter's best position was the cornerback position. They obviously tried the two kind of way thing, and there will be some of that this year, but ultimately, I think for the best return on your investment, you have to sit there and A, take care of your investment, B, make sure he's healthy, and C, put him in the best position to succeed. I think that's the cornerback position for Travis Hunter, who alongside Monteric Brown, I think is going to be a sneaky good cornerback duo for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2026. And I think that a cautious approach is only going to benefit Gladstone, Liam Coen, and the entire team, along with Travis Hunter himself, obviously. And we already kind of talked about this. Cameron Wolfe actually reported this a couple of weeks ago, but Ian Rappaport, this kind of made the rounds on Twitter yesterday, that Hunter is expected to be a full-time cornerback, part-time wide receiver. Just kind of wanted to hit the notes on that in terms of, look, we kind of already knew this from a Travis Hunter perspective, but I think that he wasn't bad as a wide receiver, and there's not necessarily situations where I wouldn't hate him being out on the field as another weapon for Trevor Lawrence and Liam Coen to kind of exploit a defense on. But his best position and his best role, I think he has truly great levels at the cornerback position. Like, if he reaches his true potential as a cornerback, I think he could be one of the best outside corners in football, but he has to commit more resources and commit more time and effort to that position. So I completely agree with this move. Just wanted to kind of recap it, though, because I know it was going around on social media yesterday when Ian Rappaport kind of tweeted it out. All right, moving on to the second presser reaction. This is going to be one that I've got a pretty big opinion on, and I think it's the correct way to answer this from a Liam Coen perspective, because they talked, him and James Gladstone, about the biggest challenges in now the second draft cycle and now going to their second offseason as a head coach GM duo for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is what Liam Coen had to say entering his second draft cycle. He said, I think some of the familiarity has helped the flow in the way that we operate on a day-to-day basis. The schedule, the routine, what the coaches expect. That's been a very clear and concise throughout the process. And I really do think a strong year 2 is crucial for the regime of James Gladstone and Liam Coen. They had a lot of success last year. You won 13 games. You won the AFC South, hosted a playoff game, had the number 1 rush defense in the entire football league. Like, there was a lot of things to be proud of. And I'm not sitting here saying that you can't sit there and enjoy and kind of, during the early parts of the offseason, really say, hey, look, we accomplished a lot of things and be proud of what we accomplished. But if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, in terms of sustained success, the ultimate kind of pillar in the National Football League where parity is king. Like, you'll see teams all the time will have that kind of one and done season where they'll reach a season where they win double-digit games and then regress to the mean, whether that's, winning 8 or 9 games the rest of the time during a regime or maybe even falling back and being towards picking at the beginning of the NFL draft. And I think if you're James Gladstone and Liam Coen, like, they really want to establish and build upon the foundation that they built last season. And I think it's a really solid foundation. I like the quarterback head coach combo with Trevor Lawrence and Liam Coen. I like the offensive skill weapons. Yes, you lost Travis Etienne to New Orleans. I still think you've got a lot of really good young talent to build around Trevor Lawrence. The offensive line is coming together with Cole Van Lanen and Anton Harrison, and we'll see if the interior of the offensive line can be healthier this next year. Defensive line, you would like to add some depth, but overall, as starters, you got Eric Armstead, you've got Devon Hamilton, you've got Josh Hines-Allen, you've got Trayvon Walker. As kind of a front four, I don't mind it. Linebacker, yes, you'll need to replace Devin Lloyd. Foye Oluokun can kind of hold things down, though, and I do think bringing back Dennis Gardeck was a plus. You obviously got Travis Hunter, who we already talked about. We've got, obviously, Monteric Brown, Buster Brown, who re-signed his contract extension, and then you got the safeties in Antonio Johnson and Eric Murray. This team has the chance to still be really good in the AFC South. But that doesn't mean that you sit there and rely and just think that, we can just roll into next season and not, or think that we can just pick up where we left off. I do think, based on kind of their responses yesterday, that Liam Coen and James Gladstone are thinking that way. And I just want to, reemphasize that year two, I would argue at this point, may even be more important than what you did in year one. But as the NFL, not for long, kind of the motto goes, you got to stay consistent. And I think the Jaguars are well on their way. All right, moving on to the third kind of presser reaction. The strongest position in the draft, or at least according to James Gladstone. I thought this was kind of interesting. We've kind of debated, all right, throughout the process, obviously, post-free agency, we saw kind of the direction the Jaguars went, kind of letting guys go, playing the comp pick formula game. You did bring in Chris Rodriguez. Where, in terms of the draft, do James Gladstone and this front office feel that there may be some value in terms of the NFL draft? Well, Gladstone had this to say. There's a good chunk of defensive ends in this crop in comparison to maybe some of the others, which I think will make for an exciting first round. Typically, when you can rush the passer, there's going to be a priority, a premium that gets placed off of that. And obviously, the Jaguars don't have a first-round pick due to the Travis Hunter trade, but I do think that edge is a position where the Jaguars, while Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, I'm good with that being your starting edge duo. I think those are two of the most talented defensive ends in the league. I would say that those two are easily in the top 20 in terms of edge rushers. You could argue top 15 in the National Football League. And the question, though, is the waves and the depth of not only defensive end, but defensive tackle. And I do think that needs to be improved. Like Danny Strigo, I really like as an option for this team at, in rotation, but you got to build off of that. Like he, to me, is like your fourth or fifth best on a really good defensive line. Not to say that he can't get better, but I just don't like him as your third. And I truly do expect edge to be an early positional target. You've got 4 draft picks in the first 100 draft picks, 1 in the second, 3 in the third round. I would be shocked if edge is not a position that the Jaguars don't look at one of those 4 picks because, A, there's a lot of talent in this draft that I think they could go, whether they want to use the 56th overall pick on an edge or if they want to wait till round 3. I still think there's really good value that this team could add to that defensive line in Jacksonville. But I want to hear from you guys. What's the Jaguars' biggest need in the 2026 NFL draft? If I had to say it, I would still probably say linebacker next to Foye Oluokun. I think would be the biggest need just because there's such a drop-off from Devin Lloyd to the other guys on your roster, Ventrell Miller and others. But you guys let me know. What is the Jaguars' biggest need in the 2026 NFL draft? Now, coming up, ESPN draft intel for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jordan Reid had a kind of interesting article in which he kind of talked about where Jacksonville could potentially target in those kind of day 2 range of picks that we just talked about. So we'll be getting to that here in just a moment. But we've been challenged to a sub-battle here at Chat Sports. Cardinals today, my guy, Joey O'Donohue, has been doing a great job over there. We're actually deskmates at Chat Sports, but he was talking a little smack, said, hey, we just recently passed you guys the subscribers. I bet you we can get to 3,000 subscribers before Jags Now. And I said, you're on. Jags Now is currently trailing Cardinals today at the time of recording this by 25 subs. We got a long way to go until 3,000. But can we beat them? Can we get to 3,000 subscribers before Cardinals today? I mean, who even roots for the Cardinals in this day and age in the year 2026? Come on now. Show them what we got. Show them that we are the best fan base here at Jags Now. Hit that subscribe button for the latest news and rumors surrounding your Duval County-led football team. All right, let's get into Jordan Reid's kind of comments here. And I thought this was really interesting in terms of potential Jaguars draft intel. He had this to say. Consistent with what the Rams did when he was there, Gladstone has not used top 30 visits in Jacksonville, which has been really annoying from a content creator's perspective, I'll be honest, but it's the way he rolls, and I'm not going to hate on it. I expect him and the Jaguars to continue this trend of picking players who can play right away, guys that can contribute right away. Defensive tackle and tight end are two position groups Jacksonville is expected to target right away on day 2. So, with that being said, defensive tackle is a no-brainer. I think you can make an argument, although I would say linebacker, that defensive tackle is a big position of need for Jacksonville. And whenever I kind of read this from Jordan Reid, I went back and I looked at Dane Brugler's The Beast, who, by the way, if you guys haven't checked it out, great in terms of kind of just draft, kind of a handy book that you can always lean on. These are some of the guys that are potential day 2 options, at least according to Brugler. And I also threw in Dante Corleone, who has got a little bit of a questionable medical situation right now. Brugler actually had him listed as a 7th round draft prospect, although I'm not sure. I don't have access to those medicals, so maybe Brugler knows something I don't. But for now, we'll keep him there. Guys like Christen Miller, Caleb Banks, who's obviously got that major kind of foot issue, Lee Hunter, the really quick, yet maybe not the most athletic defensive tackle out of Texas Tech, Dominique Orange, an athletic freak that can play nose tackle for you, Grayson Holton, who I think would be a really interesting fit in this Jaguars defense, Chris McClellan, a lot of people like out of the University of Missouri, Darrell Jackson Jr., we've taken him in a mock draft out of Florida State, Tyler Onyedem out of A&M, and Rayshon Benny out of Michigan. And regardless of whichever one that you like, again, I like Grayson Holton. There's some other guys, like if Christen Miller were to somehow fall to you at 56, I'd be all over that. Reunite him with Trayvon Walker. Defensive tackle needs to be addressed on day 2. And we kind of talked about it earlier. Eric Armstead and Devon Hamilton, they're not getting any younger. And while I think Devon Hamilton could be an extension candidate for Jacksonville, Eric Armstead's kind of in that weird kind of transitional period where he could be a potential cut candidate post-June 1st. I don't know, depending on how many more moves the Jaguars make, not only during the draft, but also through free agency. Like, they're going to have to clear some cap space. But I do think that defensive tackle, regardless of player, needs to be addressed on day 2. Those are just some 10 of the guys that I think could be options for Jacksonville during the NFL draft. But let me know down below in the comment section, who's your favorite realistic defensive tackle target for the Jags? Obviously, I don't think Peter Woods or Caden McDonald's falling to you at 56. But if you had to pick your favorite realistic defensive tackle target for the Jacksonville Jaguars, let me know down in the comment section. I guess it would be Christen Miller by default. I don't know how realistic that is, but if I'm talking about somebody that I know will be there during the Jags kind of selections, I'll go Grayson Holton out of Oklahoma. Getting into tight ends, which Jordan Reid also kind of mentioned. Now, this is something that, if you remember during the kind of NFL Combine, tight end, there was a lot of reports about the Jaguars meeting with tight ends during the NFL Combine, all 3 of whom were on this list. Eli Stowers, Oscar Delp, and Jack Andrews. I also put in just some other potential day 2 options, Max Clare, Justin Jolly, and Sam Roush out of Stanford, who, I'm not going to lie, the more I do research on him, the more I'm a fan. He could be easily tight end 3 or even, dare I say, tight end 2 in this class. The Jags, though, are clearly interested in tight end, right? They obviously pivoted off Johnny Munt earlier this offseason, and I do think that Britton Strange is going to due for a contract extension and will get one by the time the 2026 NFL season starts. But behind that, you've got Quentin Morris, who I do think is going to have an increased role. We'll see what they do with Hunter Long. I would be shocked if those are the only 3 tight ends that they kind of move forward whenever it gets to 53-man cut-down day when it comes to the 2026 NFL season. I think the Jaguars are going to add a tight end based on this reporting from Jordan Reid. I didn't necessarily think it would be as potentially early as day 2, but now the more that you think about it, I mean, the potential option of adding a tight end next to Britton Strange to kind of give Liam Coen more diverse options on the offensive side to have more dual tight end sets, I don't necessarily hate it. Because a guy like Oscar Delp, somebody that they met with who had a really good pro day, become a potential option for Jacksonville. Keep an eye on tight end during day 2 of the NFL draft. We're going to be bringing you guys a mock draft here soon, and we're going to have a lot more coverage around the Jacksonville Jaguars, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft, whether it's the offseason, or whether it finally does become time where football is back. We're going to have you covered here on Jags Now and help us in our sub-battle against Cardinals today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, peace out and have a great weekend.